Welcome to Trivial Thoughts and the Pursuit of Happiness. If this is your first time here, welcome and thank you. I'm glad you found your way to this space. And if you're returning, thank you for choosing to be here. If you've been feeling like you're late to your own life, not because you stopped trying, but because your path hasn't looked like everyone else's, this episode is for you. Today, we're starting a conversation around a simple truth that can be hard to accept, and that is, you're not behind, you're becoming. And we're beginning with awareness, because nothing changes until we're willing to notice where we are without judging ourselves for it. This episode isn't about motivation. It's not about productivity or fixing your life or suddenly figuring everything out. Today is about awareness, because becoming doesn't begin with action, it begins with noticing. Most people don't feel behind because they feel behind because at some point they started measuring themselves against expectations they never consciously chose. Timelines they inherited, milestones they absorbed, ideas about what life is supposed to look like by a certain age or stage. And awareness isn't the moment you realize that pressure isn't always truth. Sometimes it's just noise that's been repeating for so long that it feels like fact. I know what it feels like to believe you're behind simply because your life didn't unfold in the right order. There was a season in my life where I felt like I had already fallen before I even had the chance to catch up. I became a mother very young, while I was still growing myself. And for a long time, I didn't realize how much shame I was carrying. I thought it was motivation. I thought it was discipline. But it wasn't pushing me forward. It just kept me tense. Awareness came when I finally noticed how often I spoke to myself as if I was already late, already failing, already behind. That's when I realized the problem wasn't my pace. It was a story I was telling myself about it. Awareness asks questions like, what have I lived through? Instead of, what's wrong with me? It asks questions like, what has this season required of me? Instead of, why am I not further along? And that shift matters because awareness turns shame into formation. When you stop judging yourself long enough to observe, you start seeing the truth more clearly. For me, awareness showed up again later in life in a different way, when everything I thought was stable disappeared. Losing what you've worked for has a way of making you question not just your choices, but your worth. And once again, I found myself thinking I was behind. But looking back now, I can see that those seasons weren't failure. They were transitions. There were moments where life demanded that I rebuild internally before I rebuilt anything externally. Awareness doesn't erase the path. It reframes it. It allows you to see that pauses, detours, and disruptions are not proof that you missed something. They're often proof that you adapted. You might recognize awareness showing up as discomfort. It's realizing you've been rushing not because you're excited, but because you're afraid of falling behind. It's noticing that comparison drains you, even when you're doing your best. It's catching yourself thinking, I should be further by now, without asking who decided that. Awareness doesn't judge those thoughts, it just brings them into the light. One of the reasons awareness feels uncomfortable is because it slows us down. When you become aware, you start noticing patterns you used to move past without thinking. The way certain thoughts repeat, the way certain moments linger, the way your body reacts before your mind catches up. At first, awareness can feel like you're getting worse instead of better because you're seeing things you didn't see before. But awareness doesn't create the problem, it reveals it. And that revelation is not failure, it's progress. Most of us learn to survive by staying busy, by pushing forward, by not sitting with what felt heavy. Awareness asks you to sit anyway. There were long stretches of my life where I kept moving simply because stopping felt dangerous. I had responsibilities early, expectations early. I learned how to function before I learned how to reflect. And for a long time, I didn't ask myself how I was actually doing. I only asked how I was performing. Awareness, that came later, when I realized productivity had become a shield and that staying busy kept me from asking harder questions. And becoming aware of that changed how I measured growth. Feeling behind often has less to do with time and more to do with comparison. It's the quiet grief of watching others move through milestones you're still working toward. It's the exhaustion of rebuilding without a blueprint. It's the weight of carrying responsibility without recognition. Awareness allows you to name those feelings without letting them define you. It helps you separate what hurts from who you are. And that separation is powerful. Changing direction doesn't mean you quit, it means you responded. Pausing doesn't mean you failed, it means you listened. Starting over doesn't mean you lost everything, it means you carried what mattered forward. Becoming is rarely loud. Most of it happens quietly, in decisions no one applauds, in rest that looks like stagnation, in rebuilding that doesn't come with instant results. Awareness helps you recognize the work you're doing even when nothing looks finished yet. It's realizing that earning a second chance at yourself matters. That growth doesn't require a perfect timeline. That who you are today carries every version of you that came before, wiser and more grounded. If you're listening to this and realizing that awareness feels uncomfortable, I want you to know that's normal. Awareness doesn't mean you're doing something wrong, it means you're paying attention. Today, I invite you to notice one moment where you feel behind and ask yourself a few gentle questions. What am I comparing this to? Who told me this was a timeline? What might I actually be learning right now? You don't need to answer. You just need honesty. Awareness is not the end of becoming. It's the beginning. It's the moment you stop rushing past your own life. The moment you stop calling survival a delay. The moment you start honoring the work that got you here. You are not behind because awareness arrived later than you expected. You're becoming because you were brave enough to notice it. As you move through today, practice awareness without judgment. Notice one thought that makes you feel behind and let yourself observe it instead of correcting it. Awareness is not about fixing your life. It's about finally telling yourself the truth without punishment. You are not behind because your life required you to grow early, rebuild quietly, or pause when others didn't. You're becoming because you're paying attention now. And awareness is where everything meaningful begins. Before growth happens, before healing, before reinvention, there is awareness. And awareness is not judgment. It's the moment you stop living on autopilot. The moment you recognize patterns instead of repeating them. The moment you feel emotions instead of suppressing them. The moment you acknowledge where you actually are instead of pretending you're somewhere else. And that's powerful because you cannot become what you are not aware of. Awareness is where you realize you've outgrown a version of yourself. It's where you notice you've been surviving instead of living. It's where you see something feels heavy, not because you're weak, but because it's no longer aligned. Becoming doesn't start with action. It starts with recognition. Noticing this no longer fits me. This hurts more than I admit. This feels true, even if it scares me. Awareness doesn't demand immediate answers. It simply invites honesty. And honesty is the doorway to becoming. You don't wake up one day transformed. You wake up aware. And then you choose slowly and repeatedly to move differently. This is the first layer of becoming. And we'll continue peeling back together. In the next episode, we're going to talk about timelines. The ones we inherited, the ones we chase, the ones we may finally be ready to release. So before we go, I want you to repeat this affirmation with me. So take a deep breath in. Exhale. And repeat. I am allowed to grow at my own pace. Say it again. I am allowed to grow at my own pace. I want to thank you for being here with me today. Thank you for choosing awareness over pressure, and I'll meet you in the next thought.